All right, so a lot happening in Hong Kong today. We're going to be breaking down some of the things that are happening not only from an ETF standpoint, but also from a strategy standpoint that starts to move crypto, Bitcoin, and many other assets into the limelight. Well, we're breaking all that down for you today. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into Tech Path. And let's get into it first here, rolling out with this first article. HSBC rolls out cryptocurrency services in Hong Kong. And there are some very specific things around this. Obviously, this is a ETF going out, and there's a few things in here I want to highlight. This, of course, is listing 3 crypto ETFs, including a CSOP, Bitcoin Futures ETF, an Ethereum Futures ETF, and then Samsung is also doing a Bitcoin Futures active ETF, meaning you can get it to it literally today. So this is pretty big news in the sense that we'll continue to see a lot more activity out of Hong Kong, it appears, obviously with HSBC being one, I think actually the largest bank in Hong Kong, kind of the JP Morgan. And if you look at just their active users, here's further instance of that. HSBC Hong Kong had 1.7 million active mobile users as of March 2022, about 95% of all retail transactions in HSBC in Hong Kong are reportedly processed online. So this essentially is a digital bank, and we're seeing more of that anyway, I think even here in the United States, but definitely abroad. And I think with that fact, it also starts to curate into a certain demographic, and obviously the demographic is very unique and also very needed to be able to roll some of these things out. Further on into this was Jason Choi. He came in and says clients of HSBC can now buy Bitcoin and ETH ETF directly in their mobile banking app. This is a meaningful step for a bank known to be tight on crypto, but I think it appears that they have loosened up their opinion and also their actions on this going forward. Here was Cameron Winklevoss basically kind of jumping in on this. The East-West crypto flippening is upon us. Hong Kong actually has a clear path to come in and register and transparently publish list approved crypto assets. That's why we're going to become a global leader. Well, they are going to become a global leader. And this was Tyler, of course, kind of kicking it off right there with Gemini's World Tour. And very encouraged that their thoughtful and clear approach, many people around the industry, pretty much saying Hong Kong might be the new home for a lot of these entities. Now, many people might look at that and say, hey, that's okay. We're going to continue our track here in the U.S. But I feel like this is going to continue to put a lot of pressure, much like MiCA has put a lot of pressure, because this only makes our lawmakers look incompetent, especially when you have other major industries and other major countries and areas of the globe starting to initially really start to embrace this at a pretty high level. Further into this was coming over Crypto T, and I'll break this down in a little bit more of an article here, but the city is now putting pressure on banks to partner with crypto exchanges. They're spending 50 million yuan to help speed up the development and adoption of Web3 for young residents. That's not a lot, but for Web3, that is a lot coming from one jurisdiction. So that, I think, is still a pretty big statement. And then the Bank of China has also just issued securities token on Ethereum in Hong Kong. So again, more activity, all playing into something that we've talked about here on the channel quite a bit, and that is the explosion in what's happening in blockchain outside. And I know a lot of people will say, well, hey, Paul, there's still all this move toward AI and what we're seeing in terms of growth there. I definitely agree with that. I think there's going to be a lot of integration with AI and tech in general, possibly maybe even in the blockchain space. But the key here is that blockchain, and especially what's happening in the crypto space, it's here now. And not only is it here now, it's being implemented now with regulatory guidelines, regulatory framework, and now we're starting to see adoption. And that is a much further scenario, at least in terms of how far a particular technology or area of an industry has come. And this is the thing I think that just kind of slams it home. Samsung also launched an ETF, and this just some of the key features that they're focusing on there. Let me kind of highlight this. So the management fee is still, 0.89. This is part of the Chicago Mercantile CME, which is regulated by the CFTC. This is the primary regulator of the U.S. futures options. And then they're going to do HKD, Hong Kong trading, and then pave the way for investment in future crypto tech adoption. Again, this just shows more large companies that do believe in where blockchain is going and clearly are starting to set the framework for all of this to take place. Just to give you an example of some clips here, and I have a few clips, but also an interview here. This was by Laura Shen. Listen to this clip. This is a couple of finance moguls, we'll call them, within that jurisdiction, and listen to what they had to say about this.
I think these days, if you open up as a crypto company's operating bank account, the RM actually takes your call. So I think it's pretty encouraging.
Adrian's right. It is a bit more encouraging. And the HKMA and the SFC have actually met once already. There's a second meeting, which I've just received an invitation for, that will be held in a few weeks, I think. I forgot the date. But this will also be to expedite bank accounts. And I think the HKMA has taken it very seriously. So if you're definitely licensed or on the road to being licensed, you will be able to get a bank account. It's for the ones that are in the process of getting licensed that will take a little bit longer. But I'm sure that if you showed evidence of your license application or things like that, I think banks will probably start moving towards getting you banked up. The other area that was really, really difficult for... All
right, so mainly what they're talking about here are organizations that have struggled in the past in other jurisdictions of being able just to get a banking scenario played out for their company. And in some cases, even here in the US, we've already seen that start to kind of, through choke point, see that kind of constraint. What Hong Kong has done is really started to lay the framework with licensing, and that is the key element here. So this already has a path to be able to operate within Hong Kong and the surrounding areas, but this not only does that, it gives companies like Gemini and others maybe even a potential home base. And remember, this is a scenario that could be a huge issue in being able to play out in the global architecture of crypto. And what I mean by that is, if people start to set up their operations in Hong Kong, I mean, why would they start to continue to move and try to break into other jurisdictions? They would just look at, as new jurisdictions line up with crypto legislation and ruling, okay, we make it available there. But their corporate entities being held in Hong Kong, that is something that I think is a big loss for Western nations. Let's go into some further elements here. They kind of break down how Hong Kong is advancing their crypto regulations. Listen in.
How significant is the fact, and this is what Yat-Siu just mentioned, one thing that stuck out to him was the fact that Hong Kong has been able to differentiate itself on crypto assets from the mainland, where cryptocurrency trading is essentially banned on the mainland. How did Hong Kong carve that differential out from mainland policy? Yes, one country, two systems. Is this that being exemplified?
Yeah, definitely. Because after all, we operate under a different regulatory regime. We have our own currency. We have a separate legal system. I think all these underpin the world-class regulation in our financial markets. And similarly, in terms of our strengths as an international financial center, one country, two systems is the key.
Yeah. Again, you talked about the...
All right, so this gets back into an emerging region that really has an opportunity to kind of put another stake in the ground. And Hong Kong had been, when it was under British rule, it had been one of the iconic centers of finance for many, many decades. I think this may be another way for Hong Kong to really kind of position in a forward-thinking environment around a new demographic that starts to emerge. And I think this is a big opportunity. Again, it starts to line up in a lot of different fronts of how the rest of the world could be possibly taking this as an example and possibly starting to roll out in similar fashion. Key here obviously is going to be regulation and or licensing of how all this plays out. They seem to have already got it in place. If you think about this is Julia from the Hong Kong SFC, which is like Gary Gensler of the SEC. And let me break this down. There's a couple of things that we highlighted in here. CEO of the Securities and Exchange Futures Commission there in Hong Kong has emphasized the importance of trading as an integral part of the virtual asset ecosystem. So they already see that as a benefit. Hong Kong, of course, embracing to innovation and enhancing market trust. That's another big advantage. And then they've already started to line out some of the things that I think, if you think about this is kind of like MiCA 2.0, because it's got an opportunity to kind of step up some of the advantages. And Hong Kong seems to be doing that. So even they have been able to take what the rest of the world is doing, figure out maybe what works better for them and their area, and be able to implement it. So reducing regulatory risk and strengthening legislation. So they've kind of just jumped on this opportunity. This is the big one right here, expanding access to retail investors. This is the inclusion of retail investors, not only by expanding the market participation, but also provides an opportunity for wider adoption, meaning you don't have to be a millionaire to be able to invest in these direct markets. This is a problem that we have in many of the Western countries just because of accredited investors requirements. I think that is one of the things that will change finance, especially personal finance, in the future at a very, very fast rate. Here's Hong Kong's approach and policy. One country, two systems. He kind of just referenced that there in the video. And their efforts now are also going after Web3, meaning they're trying to lure in Web3. Now, if Web3 actually does make the convergence between Web 2, Web 3, what we see in adoption, whether it's in all sorts of finance, gaming, NFTs, all those things, Hong Kong could be in the perfect spot for this to happen. So very interesting. Good demographic, great regional contention in terms of some of the other hotspots, like if you look at Korea and Singapore. And basically what she lined up here as a conclusion was they basically are trying to strike a balance between embracing technological advancements and then managing the risks. Now, this sounds like something that we would love Gary Gensler to try to say, because that's the key here, is the loss of innovation. You've heard me talk about this quite at length with James Murphy, Meta Lawman, is that this is the biggest potential loss of innovation that the United States could be facing in the next decade, maybe the next 2 decades. Again, AI, I think, is more of a broader growth, and it's going to take some time to get that developed out. Could we become the leader in that? Very possible. But we could become a loser when it comes to blockchain. Just to give you an example of that, this is HSBC, I should say. And a couple of things that this is the guy that was Noel Quinn. He's their group executive there, pretty much the guy in charge. And this is something I wanted to highlight. CBDCs could help spur further economic growth by making payments and settlements more. So he's very pro CBDC. I don't know that that's a good thing, but at least it's showing that HSBC is definitely on the road to trying to change things up. So he believes that the hybrid model, sometimes called a two-tier model, because of the CBDC itself, is a claim against the central bank, but not banks providing the payment services. It's by far the best design option. The other thing he breaks down is CBDC should do no harm to monetary and financial stability, must be able to coexist with cash and other monetary and money, basically, in a flexible and innovative payment ecosystem. Would agree if that is in fact the model in which it takes place. Could Asia in general lead the CBDC innovation for the financial system worldwide? I don't know. But when you have this kind of company, meaning one of the largest banks in that region, starting to lean into this, it does start to generate some questions around it. Critical difference between CBDCs and other types of digital money, such as stablecoins and crypto, is that the latter are both forms of private money. So if stablecoins and crypto are to become relied upon in the same way, they'll also require regulation and commensurate with the risk if they're trying to get to that level. I don't necessarily ever see them truly getting to that level. This is a clip that we harvested out there, and it is this guy talking about how this might work with HSBC. It's a bit of a long clip, but listen in to what they had to say.
I'm very keen on blockchain as a technology base. We were one of the first banks globally, if not the first bank, to process trade finance on blockchain technology. We've since built tokenization of the capital markets. We did a real life, fully fledged bond issue for a bank in Europe, a central bank in Europe, just this year, written on blockchain. So I'm very much a fan of the technology. The question is, how do you use the technology for products in banking? Tokenized capital markets is one product solution. Trade finance is another product solution, all on the same technology, but different products. Crypto is a product on a technology base called blockchain. Crypto as an asset class is something that I'm more cautious on, because offering that asset class to retail investors and the same way that you'd offer a share or a bond is a different risk profile. And therefore, as a financial institution, I'll go more cautiously, and I'm very, very cautious on crypto. I don't think that is suitable as a product for many other clients we bank. But the technology is great. I think we'd have to see how the regulatory environment changes, but at the moment there isn't a strong enough regulatory environment over crypto, so I'm going to remain cautious on crypto in the near term.
Okay, and what's your stance on central bank digital currencies?
Very much in favor of it. We're developing central bank digital currency. With Enbridge in Hong Kong, there's a small group of countries that are developing that as a real life solution. We're fully in on central bank digital currency. We're one of the biggest global payments houses in the world. Last year, we processed over 600 trillion of payments on behalf of our clients. Central bank digital currency is a natural thing for HSBC to do, and it's in a regulatory environment governed by the central banks that are participating in it. So we're fully investing in that.
Any plans to develop your own custody solution for digital assets like many other banks do?
Yeah, we are developing our own custody solution for digital assets. We're going again into that sensibly, cautiously, but we are looking at that as a solution.
All right, so you see the breakdown here. I mean, this is showing some, I think, indication of where his head is. One on the CBDC side, but he's still cautious, but not negative toward crypto in general. If you look at Hang Seng Bank, this is pretty much one of the largest publicly traded companies, public companies in terms of market cap. And guess what? They're all part of the HSBC group. So this, to me, starts to really set the framework of who the players are within Hong Kong, and more importantly, what this might look like in a full rollout. And if you look at just some of the things that are happening out there, in general, in terms of the advertising side of it. So they're already looking at going into NFTs and utilizing this in terms of their ad frames. And I think this is the thing. When you have companies that are starting to move at this level, especially when it's at the retail level, it only has one direction, and that is more adoption. More adoption is going to continue to grow, and then you're going to see other surrounding nations and areas start to kind of get into the same cycle. And further into this one, this is just more of the ad dollars being spent. But again, this is an NFT art exhibition. Again, this is showing the integration of how business can possibly be utilizing this, which will be a big deal for how a major business bank will also be integrating these services. So lots happening here, I think, in the front end of this. Is this good for Bitcoin? Is it good for crypto in general? Yes, I believe this just shows another step in adoption, and it's much greater than something that we saw a couple of years ago when El Salvador started to go in this direction. Hong Kong is a major trade center. Not only is it a major trade center, it's also an influential center, both on culture, but business in general. And I think this is going to be a big one, much like the EU with what Mika has done, and we'll see a lot coming out of that, in the coming months, next year, for sure. But here, just to give an example, this is HS3 by Hang Seng. This is the bank that we were just kind of showcasing there. And they're already moving this area. I'm just going to zoom in on that. Digital asset wallet designed for NFTs, issued with Hang Seng Bank. Discover the NFT news and information. Redeem exclusive NFTs with, within that app itself. And then view and track your NFTs all in one place. This is a bank doing this. So this is pretty amazing when you think about that. What bank would you say in the United States could possibly be one of the first to do this? Drop some comments down below. Make sure and smash the like button. It does help the channel. And it also helps others discover what's happening in this space. I think it's one of the biggest things out there in terms of education, but just awareness overall. I want to go over and get into, because it's not all perfect, but I want to get into another clip here, and then I'll show you some other items before we wrap up here. Listen in on this clip right here.
So when I heard that they were launching their own NFT wallet, I was like, ooh, are they providing custodial solutions for crypto assets to their customers who might be PI, professional investors in Hong Kong? That would be incredible. And then I looked into it, and this is a nothing burger, an absolute nothing burger. Literally, if you look at the FAQ, it's just a bunch of questions with the answer being no, you can't do this, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do this. This is, of course, a custodial wallet. We don't even know whether or not it's actually NFTs. I can't figure out what chain it's built on. And all we know is that in this quote unquote wallet, Hang Seng Bank is going to, I guess, airdrop a specific God of Wealth NFTs. I mean, it is Chinese New Year, so God of Wealth is kind of important to Hong Kong people, as rewards for specific customers. And those quote unquote NFTs are not transferable. They're not tradable. They have zero utility. You can't sell them. You can't use them to redeem anything. What is that NFT? Is it even an NFT? I don't think so.
All right, so that's the kind of the opposite side of this. You can also look at this being a scenario where maybe this is just a marketing ploy, we'll see. Or is there something lining up here for the future of how these banks integrate? Let's go into this other section right here just to show you what's happening out there. This is AWS, all right? This is in Hong Kong coming up here on July 5th, and you've got AWS, Animoca, and Flow all coming together to talk about a community meetup. Now, this is good news, I guess, in the sense that they all see that this is potentially a new market emerging. We're already seeing so much activity, both from a licensing standpoint, some adoption, big banks talking about moving into it, ETFs rolling up. This is all great, and I think it's good for the industry as a whole, but is it too early? Is this one of those steps that is just too early? Because if you look back at the United States markets, some of the ones I think that you would probably compare this to is maybe what is happening with Fidelity. And this is actually Fidelity's channel talking about Web3 sandbox. Remember, they are very forward thinking. I think this is one of those that I think is going in the right direction, mainly around demographics and targeting around that, I think is the good thing here. And remember, this is just 2 weeks old. So good stuff there. Further into this, I want to get into JP Morgan and Onyx because this is kind of the bigger scenario. But if you look at, this is Onyx by JP Morgan, participating banks and corporations. If you look at this, North America, not that many right now, 9. Right there's, First Horizon, JP Morgan Chase. Then you get into, obviously, Asia Pacific, which is ridiculous. 154 banks involved all in this. So again, Wells Fargo is part of how all of this is tying together. The question would be, is Wells Fargo and HSBC using blockchains to settle Forex transaction? Does Wells Fargo have some sort of maybe future plans on this? We haven't necessarily seen anything come out of Wells Fargo just yet. But if you start to dig a little deeper and you think about EDX and some of the things we launched last week, if you didn't see that video, go check it out. Remember, EDX is all built on this thing called Talos, which essentially is a trading tool. And this is a good example of the companies that are involved in this. And right there is Wells Fargo, of course, also part of the EDX launch in terms of an exchange where you can buy Bitcoin, Ethereum, but of course it's for institutions. So what does this all mean? It means that I think we are nearing, maybe here in the US, a possible pathway here for real regulatory framework. I think that is still yet to be determined. But at the same time, we've got BlackRock and we've got, of course, 21 Shares and ARK all sitting right there in the catbird seat, waiting to see what happens around some of the SEC ruling. Because once I feel like the ETF, if the ETF does happen, and we've talked about this for over a year on this channel, then it starts to change the dynamic very quickly, and we do start to get into some sort of regulatory framework. Now, there's probably a lot of tokens that will be ruled securities, and we'll have a path, hopefully, to be able to actually register and actually get onto an exchange as a security. Other key thing there is going to be Coinbase. So how does that all play into this? So there's a lot happening right now. Make sure and stay around on the channel because this is where we start to break all this stuff down for you guys. If you are not part of the Diamond Circle, make sure and get in on that. It's our email. It's also where we do additional podcasts, some additional content that we drop into your email box every so often. So make sure and do that. And of course, if you want to catch me, it's out there on Twitter @PaulBaron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.